Hello, welcome. This is Chris Morgan, and this is the 10th video in our Reactor Subtractive Synth series. In this episode, we are going to add a filter, which is the central part of what makes subtractive synthesis. In subtractive synthesis, you start with a complex wave shape, usually a ramp wave or a square wave, triangle wave, and then you affect that spectrum by filtering or subtracting the overtones or harmonics that make that rich waveform what it is. And so you create this interesting sound that you can shape. Also, there's, with filters, resonance that can cause peaks in the spectrum that give it a very unique electronic music sound. So we have several choices. We'll start by adding the filter in the first place, and then make some adjustments there, and then we're going to add our LFO and envelope generator, which we've already done for tremolo. It's going to work out great because we can just copy and paste it. So the VCA affects the amplitude that drives the VCO, which is the timbre, and also contains of course the wave shapes for timbre and the pitch controls. And then we're going to have our VCF, voltage controlled filter. Of course, it's not voltage in the sense of analog. It's really a digital controlled filter, but we use the more vintage terms. So control or right click, built-in module, filter. We have many choices of filters. With the traditional filter with subtractive synthesis, if you have any filter, it's going to be a low-pass filter, and a low-pass filter with resonance. What's nice about Reactor is we have some of those simple low-pass filters. We also have some multi-filters that give us several choices. So I like to just jump right to that. I like to use a multi two-pole FM. The two-pole means it can give us 12 dB per octave of roll-off, as opposed to one pole, a normal filter, which would have 6 dB per octave, but it doesn't really make too much difference for what we're doing. I just like to use the two-pole, and the FM will give us frequency control. So that's what we want there. So we choose that. Notice that it has 3 outputs for high pass, band pass, and low pass. So the first thing we're going to do is go to panel, make a switch, and command drag the second and third ones in there and label that immediately: high pass, band pass, and low pass. And we will have a lecture, or I think I got all those right, on the details of what the types of filters are, and that's also covered in some of the written materials. But for now, we will just assume that you know what those are. We're going to focus on the low-pass filter, which cuts high frequencies and allows low frequencies to pass. Now, the first thing to keep in mind is that the cutoff frequency is where the frequencies are attenuated, where they drop by 3 dB and continue dropping by, in this case, 12 dB per octave, where in the spectrum between 20 and 20,000 hertz. By default, it's just set at 0. We want the cutoff frequency to move with the keyboard in general, so that as we play low notes, the same amount of spectral energy, the overtones, is attenuated as when we play high notes. So when we play, for instance, 2 octaves, or the A below middle C, which is 220 hertz, the cutoff frequency might be somewhere above that, maybe an octave or so. And then as we play A440, the cutoff frequency will be somewhat above that. So we had to make sure that we have some cutoff frequency space above the actual pitch that we're playing. So I'll give you an example of what can go wrong. If I simply run the sound into the output, you will hear it. There's our sound. Now if I run that into the end of the filter and run it that way, we don't hear anything. And the reason we don't hear anything is that it's set to, well, we might not hear anything because I don't have it on. Let me move this over and make sure that we've got that part right. It's set to high pass. We set it to low pass. We don't hear anything. The reason we don't hear anything is that the frequency, the cutoff frequency, is actually at 0 hertz right now. So there's no frequencies below 0 hertz, even though I'm playing an A below middle C, which is 220 hertz, that entire sound and all its spectral overtones are being filtered out. So if I were to add a control here, cutoff, and move that over so I can see it, I can shift that frequency up and actually hear some of my sounds. So I'm playing the A 220, and as I move the cutoff frequency up, I can hear my sound. So that's perfectly good. The problem is I don't want to have to adjust this every time. So for instance, if I set the cutoff frequency at 1000, that means I'm hearing the 220, the 440, the 660, the 880, and then after the 1000 they start to cut down. If I play an A 2 octaves above middle C, I hear a lot less frequencies because that's at 880. I'm only getting the sine tone, and then immediately the overtones are being attenuated. So I need this cutoff frequency to move with the pitches as I'm playing them on the keyboard. Most keyboards give you the option of moving by 1/3 the distance so that the high notes do sound a little bit different than the low notes, or 2/3, or even a 1-to-1. I just always use a 1-to-1. As I play the key on the keyboard, the cutoff frequency moves to that point, and then I can use the frequency cutoff for additional shifting the cutoff frequency up. So to do this, pitch input, it's very simple. Just go to built-in module, MIDI in, note pitch, take that same note pitch that I would have been using to drive the frequency of the oscillator, and have it input into the pitch input. Now wherever I play, even if I move the cutoff frequency to 0, the cutoff frequency at least is going to be at the fundamental pitch that I'm playing. So I hear a very dull A220. As I shift up the cutoff frequency, in addition, you can see it's added 5000 hertz onto the 220 hertz that was from that. The nice thing is, no matter where I play, I have the same type of spectrum. Even low notes, middle and high, they all contain this rich spectrum. And of course, if I move it down to something smaller, I have the same thing. Duller, but it's consistent for each octave. So that's very important to have that. So that is working perfectly fine now. For the last one, resonance, I can just create control, and that value goes from 0 to 1, and you will hear a unique sound that's very characteristic, very iconic of electronic music. I'm going to adjust my attack here so I can not have to wait so long for the notes to come in, and put some release there. And maybe I'll turn off those sounds there. And let's see, I have a square wave now. So as I increase the cutoff, I'm going to increase the resonance now, and you'll hear this peak in the spectrum. The resonance peak is right at the cutoff frequency. So we should hear this at the 220 hertz that I'm playing on the keyboard, plus the 2350 frequency I'm adding to that. We should hear a peak in the spectrum there. Now the nice thing about this is that I can lower, as I lower the cutoff frequency, the resonance moves with it. So you can hear how that very unique sound. Okay, and give myself a little more release here. So very low cutoff with a high resonance, or a medium resonance. Generally, you don't want to go up to full. You see, this doesn't even allow us by default to go to 1, because you really run the risk of clipping at that point. And the thing to remember with resonance is that it's resonating a particular frequency that's at the cutoff frequency. Now you may not have any spectral energy at that part of your sound. For instance, if I'm playing a particular something at 100 hertz, and so there's overtones at 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. If I were to be resonating something, let's say at 650, there's no frequency there, but as I move the cutoff frequency to something like 700, where there is spectral energy, then I'm going to get a really loud sound. So you have to be careful that you may have the resonance cranked up and not hear any effect, and then you suddenly move the cutoff frequency, or you play a different note on the keyboard and suddenly your ears are blasted out. So we have to be mindful of that resonance level. Now the last thing to do is to attach some controls and envelope generators and an LFO to the filter. So we'll do that in the next video.